You're listening to Intimacy Made Simple, the podcast where we talk about how being known and loved deeply meets the act of sex so you can have true intimacy and make your marriage strong. I'm Mary Whitman Ortiz, your host, and on today's episode, we're joined by my co-host, Rachel Landon. On this episode, we unpack what is healthy intimacy anyhow. So if you would like to see intimacy a different way than modern culture does, this episode is for you. Please join us now. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. And Rachel, we have an amazing topic for today.
So excited. What are we going to talk about?
Well, it's intimacy because that is pretty much every level of the podcast, but there's so much more to it than just saying that one word.
Yes, I can agree with that. It's pretty deep. What we talked about last week was really good. So today I have a couple questions for you. The first question I wanted to ask you is, why do you think that we need to know what healthy intimacy is?
Well, first of all, I just like to give hope and encouragement to everyone. Because if the only thing you're seeing is what's in modern culture right now, played out in the media, just that general kind of selfish, using one another approach, then if that's all you've seen, then that's pretty sad. Nobody wants to stay there. I really want to give a picture of what healthy is so that you know that there's something else out there. I don't want this brokenness to continue. Sexual brokenness is playing out in every area, in every age group. It's so sad because there are young children getting exposed to and addicted to pornography. It goes through every age group. It goes through men and women. It goes all the way through church leadership. I mean, there are so many, I'd call atrocities in the world today in regards to intimacy. And I think, for starters, we just don't know what it is. And if you don't know what it is, how can you make it happen?
That is so true. That's so true. So what would you say is the difference between healthy intimacy and modern culture's idea of intimacy?
Yes, I think modern culture is selfish. And there's so much fear in the world. When decisions are motivated by fear, it's really difficult to think about the other person. So I want to extend that grace to everybody. If you feel like you have to do something to please someone, or you have to have somebody in your life to feel like you are a whole person, then that's going to put you and the other person at a disadvantage. But having an idea of God's design for intimacy in marriage, I believe, is spirit, soul, and body. And so there is this beautiful oneness that He calls us to. And sexual intimacy is an overflow of all of those pieces coming together. It is not just the sex act, but it is this deep knowing and understanding and appreciating and loving of your spouse. And from that place, then the sexual component of the intimacy is just off the charts. And if people don't know that, they don't know what they're missing. And there's just so much more waiting for them.
That was an incredible response. I mean, I think it's just learning and understanding and growing in who you are in Christ and understanding that God designed intimacy and that we are meant to enjoy it in a healthy way. But I think we're just so bombarded with all this information and all these things that contradict that way.
Right.
That it makes us confused, you know, and then we don't have what's right being taught as much as what's wrong is being taught.
Absolutely. Those influences aren't equal.
Right.
And if you're trying to choose something that isn't the norm, I mean, we've learned about peer pressure our entire lives,
Right.
but this is in another realm here. And if you don't have that continual influence and support to make choices that are different than how the modern culture is flowing, then it's very difficult. And then add to that any complications, obstacles in the marriage, then it's like kind of fighting an uphill battle. And I really want for married couples to have this support so that they get to enjoy all of the goodness of what healthy intimacy is designed to be.
That is so good. It's so good because I think you're just looking at, your marriage and if it isn't right, you don't know how to fix it.
Right.
So what would you say are some ways that we could make our marriages healthier and some things that we could do to improve intimacy?
Yes. Well, you said two of my favorite words, and that would be ways and make,
Mm-hmm.
because to me that implies steps. And this is the Intimacy Made Simple podcast. So yes, we are going to break things down into steps so that we don't just give you this idea and tease it in front of you, but we show you how, so to speak. And I know there's a lot of levels to this too. So I just kind of want to share a few thoughts on things you can do right now, those little steps that will definitely make a difference. So I had a couple of notes I wrote to remember. What we want to do is to lean into the connection part of the relationship. So we're making the transition. It's not just about the act of sex. It's about the whole person and whole two people coming together. So leaning into the connection, valuing that, choosing that. And you're like, sounds great. What does that mean?
Right.
So I'm going to break it down in another level. And that would be listening. And obviously, we could have about 7 podcasts on listening alone, right?
Right. Yes. It's a acquired skill. You have to learn it.
And listening is with the ears. And what's that adage? If you have 2 ears and 1 mouth?
I don't know it.
So we want to lean into listening, lean into what is the intent behind what your spouse is saying to you, so that it's not just the words. Our words don't always come out right.
Right.
And if we're frustrated or hurt or offended or whatever the situation might be, then your words might even be more compromised. So lean into the motivation behind it. Create space for it. And I love practical ways to have, yes, date nights. And date nights, I think, should be more about fun than let's talk about those important things.
Right.
It's make it personal, however it's going to work for you. But the space to have the conversation within your everyday life, within your schedule, within your understanding. So I really want to hear what my spouse says. I want my spouse to feel deeply known and loved. And there's this wonderful word from Genesis that is when God is describing how Adam and Eve knew each other, and he used the word yada. And it was, as I said, the most intimate form of knowing. And that is the design, mm-hmm. that you know your spouse so personally, so deeply, that everything, every choice, every action is designed to show that love and to grow that closeness.
So I've read some comments on Facebook. Somebody had asked, like, if you could give advice for marriage, what would it be? And one of the things that I read in the comments was always be kind. And that really just hit me so deep because I was like, there are moments in time where you're frustrated, you're angry, you're upset, and you want them to know it.
Yeah, right.
So, I go back to that in that the motive is this is my marriage and I want to protect it.
Yes. Yes.
And I want to do what is right. So that means, number one, always be kind, even if you're upset. Right. So you're saying, take some time to set apart, even if it's just once a week or a month, where you're saying, these are some, I guess if you schedule it out, it's a lot easier to have a conversation than to just have something brewing and then you bring it up at the wrong time with the wrong words. That's typically my way, but I'm learning, and that's why I love your podcast, and just understanding intimacy it can be healthy, and that we can work towards making it better.
And these things are connected. So being kind is probably something we heard about when we were children.
Mm-hmm.
And we never connect the dots of how does that impact me as an individual, me as a spouse, and within the idea of intimacy and connecting sex. So it's like connect the dots. So all these different pieces actually work together.
So that's wonderful.
And I know we could go on and on about this, but I think we have given you something to really think about. And I would love to hear your feedback. As a matter of fact, we love to answer questions. So I would encourage you to go to the limitlessintimacy.com website and find the podcast tab there, and you can leave a question for us so we can answer what's on your heart, and you can leave a voice memo. So that's one of the ways that you can help us. That's one of the ways that you can join, and make sure that you share this podcast with your friends, because there are others who want to know true intimacy and want to make their marriage strong. And we will see you next time.
Have a great day.
We're so glad you joined us today, but what would make it better is if we hear from you. Do you have a question about intimacy you'd like to have answered? Here's how you can do it. Go to limitlessintimacy.com, find the podcast page, and there's a place for you to record and share your question. Now make sure you stay tuned, because we might answer your question soon. Join us next time for Intimacy Made Simple.